Italy, a land of art, history, and breathtaking landscapes. But beneath its cultural legacy lies an even deeper story, one written in DNA. Where did the Italians really come from? Are they a single people, or a genetic mosaic shaped by ancient civilizations? To find the answer, we have to go back, way back, to a time when Europe was frozen under ice, and the first humans set foot on the Italian peninsula. 40,000 years ago, small groups of hunter-gatherers arrived in Italy. They lived in harsh conditions, surviving on wild animals and plants. Then, around 20,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum hit. Ice sheets covered much of Europe, and Italy became one of the few habitable places left. Isolated from the rest of the continent, these early Italians developed unique genetic traits. Scientists call this group the Villa cluster, and their DNA holds the first clues to Italy's deep genetic roots. Then, 10,000 years ago, everything changed. A revolutionary new way of life arrived, farming. The first farmers came from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, bringing wheat, domesticated animals, and permanent settlements. With them, they also brought their genes. These early farmers mixed with the hunter-gatherers, gradually replacing their way of life. But in one place, Sardinia, the original European farmer DNA remained almost untouched, preserved like a genetic time capsule. By 3000 BC, a new group appeared, the Indo-Europeans. They were steppe pastoralists from the grasslands of Eastern Europe, spreading their language, culture, and DNA. Their influence was stronger in the north, where they laid the foundation for future Italic tribes. But in the south, another civilization was rising, the mysterious Etruscans. Their origins remain debated, but DNA suggests a link to Anatolia, hinting that they may have been descendants of the earliest farmers. Then came the Greeks. By 800 BC, Greek settlers had established colonies in southern Italy, making it an extension of the Greek world. Cities like Naples and Syracuse became centers of trade, culture, and genetic exchange. But this was just the beginning of Italy's greatest genetic transformation, the rise of Rome. For over 1,000 years, Rome ruled an empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East. Millions of people migrated to Italy, blending their DNA with the local population. Soldiers from Gaul, merchants from the Levant, and slaves from North Africa all left their mark on the genetic landscape. But when the empire collapsed, Italy fell into chaos. Northern Italy saw waves of Germanic tribes, Visigoths, Lombards, shaping the genetic makeup of regions like Lombardy and Veneto. Meanwhile, the south remained closer to its Greek and Eastern Mediterranean roots. Then came the Middle Ages, a period of invasions, conquests, and new migrations. The Byzantine Empire controlled parts of Italy, bringing Eastern influences. Arab rulers governed Sicily for over 200 years, introducing North African and Middle Eastern DNA. Then, the Normans, descendants of Viking settlers in France, took over, adding yet another layer to southern Italy's genetic mix. So, what does modern Italian DNA reveal? Northern Italians share closer genetic ties to the French and Germans. Southern Italians show more links to Greeks and Eastern Mediterranean populations. In Sicily, traces of Jewish and Phoenician ancestry remain. And perhaps most surprising, Northern Italians have more Neanderthal DNA than Southerners. Italy's DNA tells a story of migration, adaptation, and survival. There is no single battalion gene, just an ever-evolving tapestry of different peoples and cultures. The story of Italian DNA is not just the story of a nation, it's the story of civilization itself. For thousands of years, the Italian peninsula has been a crossroads of civilizations, a land where cultures collided, merged, and reshaped history. But beyond its art and architecture, Italy's genetic history holds an even more fascinating secret, one that tells the story of its people, their migrations, and the forces that shaped their DNA. Italy's genetic journey begins over 40,000 years ago, when the first modern humans arrived in Europe. These Paleolithic hunter-gatherers roamed the forests and valleys, living in small, nomadic groups. But as the Ice Age tightened its grip, the population shrank, retreating to warmer refuges like Italy. This isolation created genetic distinctions that still exist today, forming the foundation of Italy's earliest ancestry. Then, around 8000 BC, a massive transformation took place. The Neolithic Revolution arrived, bringing early farmers from Anatolia. These settlers introduced agriculture, permanent villages, and a new genetic signature that gradually replaced much of the original hunter-gatherer DNA. But in some parts of Italy, like Sardinia, the genetic legacy of these first farmers remained largely unchanged, preserved in a way that makes Sardinians unique even today. By 2500 BC, another major wave reshaped the Italian gene pool: the arrival of the Indo-European steppe pastoralists. These horse-riding warriors brought new technologies, languages, and customs, leaving a lasting genetic impact, especially in northern and central Italy. The steppe influence was strongest among the Italic tribes, ancestors of the Latins, Samnites, and others who would later play a key role in Rome's rise. But Italy's genetic history isn't just about conquests, it's about connections. The Etruscans, one of the most advanced civilizations of pre-Roman Italy, had genetic links to the early Anatolian farmers. Meanwhile, the Phoenicians, master sailors from modern-day Lebanon, established colonies in Sicily, mixing their DNA with local populations. Then came the Greeks. By 800 BC, Greek settlers transformed southern Italy into a vibrant part of the Hellenic world. Cities like Taranto and Reggio Calabria flourished, and the genetic influence of the Greeks remains strong in southern Italians to this day. But no force shaped Italy's genetic landscape more than the Roman Empire. From 27 BC to 476 AD, Rome became the world's first superpower, controlling vast territories across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Millions of people moved through Italy: soldiers, traders, slaves, creating an unprecedented genetic melting pot. This era saw a surge in genetic diversity, with influences from as far as North Africa and the Levant becoming embedded in the Italian gene pool. However, Rome's fall in the 5th century triggered new migrations. Northern Italy saw an influx of Germanic tribes, Goths, Lombards, who left a genetic imprint that makes northern Italians closer to Central Europeans than their southern counterparts. Meanwhile, the Byzantines, Arabs, and Normans ruled parts of southern Italy, introducing Eastern Mediterranean, North African, and even Viking ancestry into the mix. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and Italy became a hub of trade, science, and exploration. The movement of people across Europe intensified, but the genetic structure of Italians remained largely set by the migrations of earlier millennia. Today, DNA analysis reveals a clear north-south genetic gradient. Northern Italians cluster more closely with French and Central Europeans, while southern Italians show stronger ties to Greeks, Turks, and the Eastern Mediterranean. But perhaps the most surprising revelation: despite thousands of years of migration, conquest, and cultural shifts, modern Italians still retain strong genetic continuity with their ancient ancestors. Whether in the Alps, the rolling hills of Tuscany, or the sun-soaked shores of Sicily, Italian DNA tells the story of a land shaped by history yet deeply rooted in the past. Italy's genetic history is a mosaic of ancient migrations, cultural exchanges, and evolutionary adaptations. But what if DNA could reveal not only where Italians came from, but also how their environment shaped them over millennia? The genetic differences between northern and southern Italians aren't just the result of history. They are a reflection of how humans evolved to survive in vastly different climates and lifestyles. The north of Italy, with its alpine regions and temperate climate, presented a different set of challenges than the warm Mediterranean south. And DNA evidence suggests that over thousands of years, the ancestors of northern and southern Italians adapted in unique ways. One of the most striking genetic adaptations found in northern Italians relates to insulin metabolism. Studies show that genes involved in glucose regulation, thermogenesis, and fat storage evolved in response to colder environments and a diet rich in animal proteins during the Ice Age. These adaptations may have helped early northern populations store energy efficiently, ensuring survival in harsh winters. Today, these genetic traits might still be influencing modern health. Studies suggest that northern Italians have a lower risk of type 2 diabetes and obesity compared to their southern counterparts. But the genetic story of southern Italians is shaped by a different kind of adaptation. Unlike the north, where cold winters required energy conservation, the south faced intense sun exposure and a greater risk of infectious diseases due to its proximity to trade routes and foreign invaders. This led to selective pressures favoring genes related to skin pigmentation, immune system function, and resistance to certain pathogens. For example, genes involved in melanogenesis, responsible for skin pigmentation, appear to have undergone selection in southern Italians, likely as a defense mechanism against high ultraviolet radiation. This adaptation not only reduced DNA damage from the sun but may have also played a role in preventing heat stress. Interestingly, southern Italians have a lower incidence of skin cancer compared to populations in northern Europe, which could be linked to this long-term genetic adaptation. Another critical adaptation relates to the immune system. Southern Italy, being a hub of Mediterranean trade and conquest, was more frequently exposed to diseases brought by foreign travelers. This constant exposure may have led to the selection of genetic variants that enhance immune defenses, particularly against pathogens like malaria, which was historically more common in the warm, marshy regions of the south. Certain immune-related genes in southern Italians show signs of positive selection, meaning that individuals carrying these beneficial mutations had a better chance of survival and passing on their genes. But genetics isn't just about ancient survival. It also impacts longevity. Italy is home to some of the longest living populations in the world, particularly in regions like Sardinia and Calabria. Genetic studies suggest that pathways related to inflammation, stress resistance, and cellular repair have been under selective pressure in these populations, contributing to an increased lifespan. Some of these adaptations might have originated thousands of years ago as defenses against environmental stresses, but today, they are associated with lower rates of age-related diseases. The differences between northern and southern Italians highlight a fascinating truth. Our DNA isn't just a record of where we came from. It's a reflection of how our ancestors lived, what they ate, and what challenges they faced. Whether shaped by freezing winters or relentless sun, by famine or disease, Italian DNA is proof that human survival is a story written in our genes. Italians, one of the most culturally rich and historically significant populations in the world. But what if I told you that their genetic story is even more fascinating than their art, architecture, and cuisine? The DNA of Italians carries the echoes of ancient migrations, lost civilizations, and unexpected ancestral links. It's a tapestry woven over tens of thousands of years, stretching back to the Ice Age and beyond. So, what does Italian DNA reveal? How did different groups shape the genetics of modern Italy? And what surprising discoveries have scientists made about the ancestry of this remarkable population? Let's dive deep into the genetic history of Italian DNA. To understand the full story, we have to travel back thousands of years, to a time when humans were battling the Ice Age. During this period, much of Europe was covered in ice, forcing human populations to seek shelter in warmer areas. Southern Italy became one of these crucial refuges, preserving early European genetic diversity. The people who lived here were part of a broader group known as Western hunter-gatherers, a population that once dominated the European continent. Their DNA can still be found in Italians today, especially in the north. But then came the Neolithic Revolution, one of the most important transformations in human history. Around 8,000 years ago, a new group of people arrived in Italy from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, bringing with them a revolutionary idea: farming. These early farmers didn't just bring new tools and agricultural techniques, they also introduced a completely new genetic lineage that would mix with the existing hunter-gatherer populations. This Neolithic migration had a profound impact on Italian DNA, and its influence can still be seen, particularly in Sardinians, who have retained one of the purest genetic signatures of early European farmers. But Italy's story doesn't stop there. Around 4,500 years ago, a powerful and mysterious migration changed Europe forever: the arrival of steppe pastoralists from the Eurasian grasslands. These were Indo-European speakers, skilled horse riders who spread across the continent, introducing new languages, customs, and genetic traits. Their DNA became an integral part of the Italian genome, especially in the north, where their genetic impact is stronger than in the south. However, southern Italians have a slightly different genetic makeup. Instead of strong steppe influence, their DNA reveals traces of ancient connections to the eastern Mediterranean, including Greece, Anatolia, and even the Caucasus region. This is where history and genetics align perfectly, because, as we know, southern Italy was once home to Greek colonies, and later, it became part of major Mediterranean empires, including the Byzantine and Arab civilizations. These connections left genetic imprints that can still be seen today. And speaking of historical influences, there's one more major genetic surprise hidden in Italian DNA. Studies have shown that many Southern Europeans, including Italians, carry a small but significant amount of sub-Saharan African ancestry. This likely arrived during the time of the Roman Empire, when people from across Africa, the Middle East, and Europe were moving freely through trade and military expansion. While the percentage is small, often around 1-3%, it's a fascinating reminder of how interconnected the ancient world really was. So, when we look at the genetics of Italy today, we see a north-south gradient. Northern Italians are genetically closer to other Western Europeans, while Southern Italians share more ancestry with Mediterranean populations. But no matter where you look, Italian DNA is a beautiful mix of ancient hunter-gatherers, early farmers, Bronze Age warriors, and Mediterranean traders, a true reflection of Italy's rich and diverse history. But what does all of this mean for Italians today? How does genetics impact health, longevity, and even physical traits? And what does the future of genetic research hold? Stay with us as we uncover more groundbreaking discoveries about Italian DNA. Italy is famous for many things: its art, its culture, its cuisine. But perhaps nothing defines its past more than the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. For over 1,000 years, Rome ruled vast territories stretching from Britain to the Middle East, from North Africa to the Caucasus. But what if I told you that the genetic legacy of this empire is still present in modern Italians? That, hidden within their DNA, are the stories of ancient conquests, migrations, and cultural fusions. To uncover this, we must go back over 2,000 years, to the time when Rome was just a small city-state on the Italian peninsula. As Rome expanded, it absorbed millions of people from different regions: Celts from Gaul, Greeks from the Mediterranean, Berbers from North Africa, and traders from the Middle East. These weren't just political expansions, they were biological expansions, introducing new genetic markers into the Italian population. Studies of ancient Roman skeletons reveal something shocking. The genetic makeup of Rome during its imperial peak was completely different from earlier populations in Italy. At its height, Rome was a genetic melting pot, with individuals carrying DNA from as far as Anatolia, the Levant, and even the Caucasus region. This diversity was a direct result of Rome's vast trade networks and military campaigns, which brought enslaved people, merchants, and settlers from every corner of the empire. But what happened after the empire collapsed? Around 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell, leading to a massive shift in Italy's genetic landscape. As Roman power weakened, new groups entered the peninsula, Germanic tribes like the Goths and Lombards, who brought fresh waves of Northern European DNA. This is why, when we compare Northern Italians to Southern Italians, we find a stronger genetic connection to Central and Northern Europe in the north, while the south retains more of its Mediterranean and Greek-influenced ancestry. And let's not forget Sicily, a key player in this story. This island, sitting at the crossroads of Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, experienced waves of genetic input from Arabs, Normans, and even Byzantine Greeks. This history is still visible today. Studies show that Sicilians carry a small but unique genetic imprint from the Middle East and North Africa, dating back to the period of Arab rule in the Middle Ages. So, what does this all mean for modern Italians? It means that their DNA is a living record of Rome's power, its rise, and its eventual fall. It explains why Italians from Venice to Naples to Palermo may look different, yet share common threads of ancestry. And it reminds us that genetics and history are deeply connected. Just like the empire that once ruled the world, Italian DNA is a testament to centuries of movement, migration, and mixing. But there's still one big question left. How does this ancient genetic history affect Italians today? Do these historical migrations influence things like health, disease resistance, or even personality traits? In the next part of our journey, we'll dive into the modern impact of Italy's genetic past. So stay with us. Italy is a country of contrasts, whether it's food, culture, or even dialects. But did you know these differences go deeper than just traditions? They are etched into the DNA of Italians, creating a genetic divide between the North and South that has existed for thousands of years. But why does this divide exist? What historical forces shaped this genetic split? And how does it impact modern Italians today? To answer this, let's go back thousands of years. The first major genetic influence on Italy came from Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, who introduced agriculture and settled across the entire peninsula. But as time went on, Different migration patterns shaped the genetics of northern and southern Italy in unique ways. The north saw strong influences from Central and Northern Europe. Celtic tribes migrated into the region, followed by Romans, Germanic Lombards, and later, Austrian and French rule. DNA studies confirm that northern Italians share more genetic similarities with French, Swiss, and even some German populations than with their southern counterparts. Meanwhile, the south followed a different path. Due to its location in the Mediterranean, southern Italy had more contact with ancient Greeks, Phoenicians, Arabs, and Byzantines. This resulted in a stronger genetic connection to Greece, the Levant, and even North Africa. In fact, genetic research shows that southern Italians are closer to Greek islanders than they are to northern Italians. One of the most interesting findings comes from Y chromosome studies, which trace paternal ancestry. These studies reveal that haplogroups like R1b, common in Western and Central Europe, are more dominant in the north, while J2 and E1b1b, which have Mediterranean and Near Eastern origins, are found in higher frequencies in the south. But here's where things get really fascinating. Sicily and Sardinia are in a league of their own. Sardinians, in particular, have remained genetically distinct from the rest of Italy due to their island isolation. They retain one of the purest traces of Europe's first farmers, with very little genetic influence from later migrations. Sicily, on the other hand, is a genetic mosaic, showing traces of Greek, Arab, Norman, and even Viking ancestry due to its rich history of conquests and trade. So, does this mean northern and southern Italians are completely different? Not at all. They share a common genetic foundation, but historical migrations, geography, and cultural exchanges have created subtle but significant genetic differences over time. And here's something that might surprise you. Modern genetic research suggests that the north-south divide isn't as rigid as it once was. Over the past century, internal migration within Italy has blurred the genetic lines, with more mixing happening than ever before. However, echoes of the past still remain, influencing not just appearance, but even disease susceptibility and metabolism. So, what does this mean for the future? Could these genetic differences fade over time, or will they continue to shape Italy for generations to come? The answer lies in how populations move, mix, and evolve, a story that is still being written in the DNA of modern Italians. Stay with us, because in the next part, we'll explore something even more intriguing: how Italian genetics influence health, longevity, and even personality traits. Italy is home to some of the world's longest-living people. From the sun-soaked villages of Sardinia to the hilltop towns of Calabria, there are communities where people routinely live past 100, healthy, active, and full of life. But why? Is it just the Mediterranean diet, the relaxed lifestyle? Or could it be something deeper, something hidden in their DNA? Scientists have spent years trying to decode the genetic secrets of Italian longevity, and the findings are nothing short of fascinating. First, let's talk about Sardinia, one of the world's official blue zones, places where people live significantly longer than the global average. Sardinians don't just live long, they age well, staying active and mentally sharp even in their 90s and beyond. What's their secret? Genetic studies have revealed that Sardinians have a unique DNA signature that sets them apart from the rest of Italy. This isn't just because of their diet or lifestyle. It's because of genetic isolation. Sardinians descend largely from Europe's first farmers, and because they lived on an island with little outside genetic influence, they retained rare genetic variants that might protect against age-related diseases. One key discovery: a gene linked to reduced inflammation and better immune response. Chronic inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of aging, and Sardinians may have a genetic advantage that slows down this process. But it's not just Sardinia. Other regions in Italy also show remarkable longevity, especially in the south. What do they have in common? Scientists have found that many long-living Italians share a specific variation in the FOXO3 gene, a gene directly linked to slower aging and increased lifespan. Another surprising factor: Italian genetics may also protect against heart disease. Studies show that people in regions like Calabria and Campania have a higher frequency of gene variants that regulate cholesterol and blood pressure, keeping their hearts healthier for longer. And then there's the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in our intestines that influence everything from digestion to immune function. Recent research has found that Italian centenarians have a unique gut microbiome composition, possibly shaped by both diet and genetic factors, that helps maintain health well into old age. But here's the most mind-blowing part. Scientists believe that some of the same genes linked to longevity in Italians might also influence personality traits. Many centenarians share common characteristics. They are optimistic, socially active, and resilient in the face of stress. It turns out, there might be a genetic basis for this, with certain DNA variants playing a role in stress resistance and emotional well-being. So, does this mean that Italians are genetically programmed to live longer? Not exactly. Genetics is just one part of the equation. Lifestyle, diet, and environment all play a crucial role. But the unique genetic makeup of many Italians gives them a head start, helping them resist disease, age more slowly, and enjoy longer, healthier lives. But here's a question. Could these longevity genes be passed on to future generations? Or will modern lifestyles erase this advantage? Stay tuned, because next, we're diving into how Italian genetics shape health beyond just longevity, impacting everything from metabolism to disease resistance. Italy is more than just a country. It's a genetic crossroads, shaped by thousands of years of migration, conquest, and trade. From the hunter-gatherers of the Ice Age to the Roman Empire and beyond, every wave of migration has left an imprint on the DNA of modern Italians. But how exactly did this happen? And what does it reveal about the deep genetic roots of Italy's people today? Let's go back, way back, before Rome, before the Etruscans, before civilization itself. The first humans to settle in Italy were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, around 20,000 years ago. They left behind something crucial, the Villabruna genetic signature, a DNA marker that still exists in modern Italians today. But they weren't alone for long. Around 8,000 years ago, a new wave of people arrived, Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. These early agriculturalists didn't just bring farming techniques, they fundamentally reshaped the genetic landscape of Italy. Their DNA mixed with the local hunter-gatherers, creating a new genetic identity, one that still forms a major part of Italian ancestry today. But this was just the beginning. Fast forward to the Bronze Age, around 4,500 years ago. This is when the Indo-European migrations swept across Europe, including Italy. These were horse-riding warriors from the Pontic steppe, modern Ukraine and Russia, bringing new technology, new languages, and new DNA. And guess what? Their genetic signature is still present in Italians today, especially in the north, where their influence was strongest. But one of the biggest genetic transformations came from a civilization that shaped the world, the Romans. The Roman Empire didn't just expand its borders, it expanded the Italian gene pool. As Rome conquered territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, it brought thousands of people from different cultures into Italy. And the DNA evidence is clear. During the height of the Roman Empire, genetic diversity in Italy exploded. Studies show that ancient Romans were genetically closer to modern Greeks and Turks than to earlier Italians. But then, something unexpected happened. After the fall of Rome, Italy became genetically isolated again. The empire collapsed, long-distance trade declined, and Italy's gene pool began to stabilize. But the migrations didn't stop. The Middle Ages saw new invaders, Lombards, Normans, Byzantines, Arabs, all leaving subtle genetic traces. And here's where things get fascinating. DNA studies show that northern Italians today have more genetic overlap with Central and Western Europeans, while southern Italians share closer ancestry with Greeks, Levantines, and even traces of North African populations. Why? Because different regions of Italy experienced different waves of migration, leaving their mark on the DNA of modern Italians. So, what does all this mean? It means that Italian DNA is not just Italian. It's a living record of thousands of years of history, movement, and adaptation. But here's the big question. How does this ancient genetic legacy influence modern Italians today? Stay tuned, because next, we'll dive into how these deep genetic roots impact everything from metabolism to disease resistance. Imagine a place in Europe where ancient DNA has remained almost unchanged for thousands of years. A place where the people are more genetically similar to Neolithic farmers from 8,000 years ago than to their own Italian neighbors. That place exists. It's Sardinia. Sardinians are unlike any other European population. Their DNA holds secrets about Europe's past, and scientists are still uncovering how this isolated island became a living genetic time capsule. But how did this happen? And why is Sardinia so different from the rest of Italy? To understand this mystery, we need to go back to the Neolithic period, about 10,000 years ago. This was when early farmers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, spread across Europe, bringing agriculture, new technologies, and their DNA. Most of Europe, including mainland Italy, experienced waves of migration afterward, from the Bronze Age steppe migrations to Roman, Germanic, and later Arabic influences. But Sardinia, it stayed genetically isolated. Why? Because of the Mediterranean Sea. Unlike the Italian mainland, where invaders and traders constantly arrived, Sardinia's geography acted as a shield, keeping the original Neolithic farmer DNA largely intact. And the proof? DNA studies show that Sardinians have the highest percentage of Neolithic ancestry of any European population. In fact, when scientists studied the genome of Otzi the Iceman, a 5,300-year-old mummy found in the Alps, they discovered that his closest modern relatives aren't in the Alps. They're in Sardinia. That's right. Sardinians are more closely related to this ancient European than to most modern Italians. But it's not just their ancient genetics that make Sardinians unique. Their DNA also holds clues about health and longevity. Sardinia is one of the world's 5 blue zones, regions where people live longer than anywhere else. And genetics play a big role. Sardinians have a unique genetic makeup that reduces inflammation, protects against heart disease, and may even contribute to their extraordinary lifespans. One example, a mutation in the FOXO3 gene, which is linked to long life and found more frequently in Sardinians than in most other Europeans. Another reason for their longevity, low genetic diversity. Since Sardinians have been genetically isolated for so long, they carry fewer harmful mutations that could lead to diseases. But this genetic isolation has a downside, too. Because Sardinians have been so genetically distinct for thousands of years, they also have higher rates of certain rare genetic disorders. For example, Sardinia has one of the highest frequencies of beta thalassemia, a genetic blood disorder. This is a classic example of a genetic trade-off. The same genes that once provided protection against malaria in Sardinia's past are now responsible for a higher risk of disease today. So what does all this mean? It means that Sardinians are a genetic window into the past, giving scientists a rare opportunity to study ancient European DNA, human adaptation, and the secrets of longevity. But here's the big question. How much longer will Sardinia remain a genetic time capsule? With increasing migration and modern transportation, the island is no longer as isolated as it once was. Scientists believe that over the next few centuries, Sardinians may become more genetically similar to mainland Italians and other Europeans. In other words, the genetic time capsule may slowly fade away. But for now, Sardinia remains one of the most fascinating genetic mysteries of Europe, a place where DNA has preserved the story of ancient migrations, human survival, and the secrets of long life. And speaking of genetic mysteries, what about the Etruscans, one of Italy's most enigmatic civilizations? That's exactly what we'll uncover next, the lost DNA of the Etruscans and their unexpected genetic legacy in modern Italy. For centuries, historians have debated who the Etruscans really were. They were one of Italy's most advanced ancient civilizations, flourishing even before the rise of Rome. They built cities, developed a unique language, and influenced Roman culture. Yet, by 100 BCE, the Etruscans had completely disappeared. Or did they? New genetic research suggests that the Etruscans never truly vanished. Their DNA still exists, hidden within modern Italians. So, who were the Etruscans? And what happened to their genetic legacy? Let's go back over 3,000 years ago, to a time before Rome, when the Etruscans ruled central Italy. They lived in what is now Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio, and their civilization thrived for over 500 years. But their origins were a mystery. Even the ancient Greeks couldn't agree on where they came from. Some believed the Etruscans were native to Italy, while others, like the historian Herodotus, claimed they migrated from Anatolia, modern Turkey. For centuries, this debate continued, until DNA analysis finally gave us an answer. A groundbreaking genetic study compared ancient Etruscan DNA to modern and prehistoric populations. And the results? Etruscans were not migrants from Anatolia. Their DNA closely matched Neolithic farmers who had already been living in Italy for thousands of years. This means the Etruscans were an indigenous Italian population, not foreign settlers. But if their DNA was native to Italy, What happened to them? The answer lies in ancient Rome. By 300 BCE, Rome was expanding rapidly, and the once powerful Etruscans were absorbed into the Roman Republic. They didn't disappear. They were simply assimilated, and their genetic traces, they still exist in modern-day Tuscans and other Central Italians. But here's the surprising part. Not all of their DNA survived equally. While most Etruscan ancestry is still found in Central Italy, some genetic components faded over time due to mixing with other populations. For example, modern Tuscans share more genetic similarities with Northern Europeans today than they did in ancient times. Why? Because after Rome fell, Tuscany experienced migrations from Germanic tribes, such as the Lombards. These later migrations diluted some of the Etruscan genetic signatures, but not all of them. Certain Y-DNA haplogroups common in Etruscan remains, like G2A and J2, are still found in many Tuscans today. Even some cultural elements survived. The Etruscans spoke a unique non-Indo-European language, which was lost over time. But traces of Etruscan words still exist in modern Italian dialects. And let's not forget their influence on Roman culture, from architecture to religious practices to the very symbols of Roman power. So, while the Etruscan civilization disappeared, their genes, culture, and legacy still live on in Italy. But here's the big question. If the Etruscans were absorbed into Rome, what other genetic mysteries lie hidden in Italian DNA? The answer might surprise you, because the next major shift in Italy's genetic history came not from Europe, but from North Africa and the Middle East. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. How centuries of migration shaped the DNA of southern Italy and Sicily. The Roman Empire wasn't just about military conquests and grand architecture. It was one of the most powerful forces of genetic transformation in Italy's history. Over centuries, Rome became a melting pot of different civilizations, pulling in people from Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But how exactly did this impact the DNA of Italians today? At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched across vast territories, connecting Italy to regions as far as Britain, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. This massive network of trade, migration, and warfare brought in an unprecedented level of genetic diversity. Rome itself, as the beating heart of the empire, became a hub where traders, slaves, soldiers, and officials from different ethnic backgrounds mixed and settled. This led to the first major wave of large-scale genetic blending in the Italian peninsula. Historical records and genetic studies indicate that many of Rome's elite families had ancestry linked to Greece, the Levant, and even North Africa. But beyond the aristocracy, the common people of Rome were even more diverse. Gladiators and slaves, who often came from conquered lands, brought genetic influences from Celtic tribes, Germanic warriors, and even Central Asian nomads. Over generations, their DNA merged into the wider Roman population, leaving a lasting imprint. One of the most significant genetic shifts occurred after the fall of the empire. As Rome declined, waves of barbarian invasions reshaped the genetic makeup of northern and central Italy. The Lombards, Goths, and Franks left their genetic mark, particularly in regions like Lombardy and Tuscany, contributing to the higher northern European ancestry found in these areas today. But what about southern Italy? Unlike the north, this region remained more connected to Mediterranean trade routes. Even after Rome's fall, southern Italy continued receiving genetic influences from Greek, Byzantine, and later, Arab populations. This explains why modern southern Italians share closer genetic ties to eastern Mediterranean populations than their northern counterparts. In essence, the Roman Empire acted as a genetic bridge, linking Italy to multiple civilizations and laying the foundation for the diverse DNA signatures found in Italians today. The empire may have crumbled, but its genetic legacy still thrives in the people of modern Italy. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Italy entered a turbulent era marked by invasions, migrations, and power struggles. This period wasn't just about political shifts. It also left a deep impact on the genetic makeup of Italians. So, who were the key players in reshaping Italy's DNA during the medieval era? One of the first major migrations came from the Germanic tribes. The Goths, led by Theodoric the Great, took over much of Italy in the late 5th century. Their rule, however, didn't last long before the Lombards arrived. Unlike the Goths, the Lombards stayed, particularly in the north, where they established the Lombard kingdom. Genetic studies show that modern northern Italians carry a noticeable trace of Germanic ancestry, setting them apart from their southern counterparts. But the Lombards weren't the only ones to leave a genetic footprint. The Byzantine Empire, which sought to reclaim Italy after Rome's fall, brought Greek influences back into the peninsula. Cities like Ravenna and parts of southern Italy saw an influx of Byzantine settlers, contributing to the genetic ties between southern Italians and the eastern Mediterranean. Then came one of the most transformative migrations, the Arab expansion. In the 9th century, Arab forces conquered Sicily, ruling for over 2 centuries. This period introduced Middle Eastern and North African genetic influences, particularly in Sicilian and southern Italian populations. Even today, DNA evidence shows a small but significant percentage of North African ancestry in Sicilians, a legacy of this period of Arab rule. By the 11th century, another wave of genetic mixing arrived, the Normans. Originally Viking warriors who settled in France, the Normans conquered southern Italy and Sicily. Their arrival added another layer of genetic complexity, introducing northwestern European DNA into regions already influenced by Greeks, Byzantines, and Arabs. All these migrations contributed to the genetic diversity of Italy, creating the distinct north-south genetic divide we see today. While northern Italy has stronger genetic ties to Central and Northern Europe due to Germanic and Frankish migrations, southern Italy reflects a deeper Mediterranean connection, influenced by Greek, Arab, and Byzantine ancestry. The medieval era wasn't just a time of war and conquests, it was a period that shaped the very DNA of Italy, creating a unique genetic blend that still defines Italians today. Italy's genetic history isn't just a story of the past, it continues to shape the present. From scientific discoveries to global migration patterns, Italian DNA has left its mark far beyond the borders of the peninsula. So, what does modern science tell us about Italy's genetic legacy today? One of the most fascinating aspects of Italian DNA is its impact on health and longevity. Studies show that Italians, particularly those from regions like Sardinia, have some of the highest concentrations of longevity-related genes in the world. Sardinia is a well-known blue zone, where people often live past 100 years. Scientists believe this is due to a combination of genetic factors, diet, and lifestyle. But the genes that promote longevity in some cases might also be linked to diseases like type 2 diabetes, showing how genetics can be a double-edged sword. Beyond health, Italy's genetic footprint extends across the world. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, millions of Italians emigrated, especially to the Americas. Today, around 80 million people worldwide have Italian ancestry, with large communities in the United States, Argentina, Brazil, and Canada. Genetic studies on Italian Americans and Italian Argentinians reveal that many still carry distinct regional markers from their ancestors. For example, Southern Italians who migrated to the US and Argentina often have higher Mediterranean and Near Eastern genetic influences, reflecting their historical past. Advancements in DNA technology have also allowed people around the world to trace their Italian roots. Companies offering ancestry testing have reported a surge in people discovering Italian heritage, sometimes from unexpected places. Even genetic comparisons between modern Italians and ancient remains show remarkable continuity, suggesting that, despite all the migrations and invasions, the core of Italian DNA has remained resilient over millennia. But perhaps the most intriguing discovery is how Italian genetics are influencing research in medicine. Scientists are using Italian genetic data to understand disease patterns, develop new treatments, and even explore the genetic factors behind creativity and intelligence, traits often associated with Italy's long history of innovation. From shaping the health of future generations to preserving a cultural and genetic identity across continents, Italy's DNA is not just a relic of the past, it's a living, evolving legacy that continues to influence the world today.